Hello, we are back today with chapters 9 and 10 of our novel I Survived the Joplin Tornado 2011. Starting with chapter 9. Dr. Gage helped Dex up and practically dragged him to the car. By the time Dex was in his seat, the hail had stopped. Dr. Gage opened the glove compartment and took out a first aid kit. He fished out an ice pack, gave it a good smack, and laid it gently on the painful lump on Dex's scalp. "You sure you're all right?" Dr. Gage said, his brow crinkled up with worry. "I'm fine," Dex said, and luckily he was. He just hoped that Mom wouldn't find out. "I am so sorry, Dex. I never should have put us in the middle of that field. From the radar, I actually thought the storm was going to lose power. I should have known better." "I think your car is in worse shape than me," Dex said. A hailstone had turned the windshield into a spider of cracks. Dr. Gage laughed. "I've had it replaced twice this year already." They sat for a few minutes until the rain stopped. "It always surprises me," Dr. Gage said. "Nature can be so violent one minute and so peaceful the next, and we humans have no control at all." Dr. Gage opened his door and stepped outside. A few seconds later he came back holding a huge hailstone, perfectly round and glistening. He presented it to Dex as though it was a priceless diamond, a souvenir. It was very light and smooth. Dex brought it up to his nose and sniffed it. It smelled musty, and he caught a whiff of something strangely familiar. Dr. Gage seemed to read his mind. "Mint, right?" "That's it," Dex said. "I wish I could tell you why. We can put it in my little freezer until we get home." Dex had already decided he'd bring it to school tomorrow. He'd pack it in a small cooler, show it to the guys at lunch. Dylan would freak. Dr. Gage turned his attention to the weather radar map. He pointed at two red blotches pulsing across the screen. "Look at these," he said with surprise. "There are two new storms heading this way. Both are supercells." His face darkened. "It's going to get dangerous around here when all of these storms come together. Jimmy and Sarah love this kind of weather, but I think it's too risky to be out chasing. I can't tell where these storms are heading and how strong they're going to get." He looked at Dex apologetically. "I think we should head back to Joplin. Call it a day." "That's fine," Dex said, trying not to sound too relieved. The lightning had spooked him, and that hailstone had almost cracked open his skull. He'd seen enough bad weather for one day. Dex relaxed on the ride back to Joplin as Dr. Gage told him funny stories about himself and Dad in college. But as they got closer to Dex's neighborhood, Dr. Gage got quiet. He kept one eye on the radar map and kept glancing warily into the rearview mirror. Was someone following them? Was Dr. Gage going to get a speeding ticket? Dex turned around expecting to see flashing police lights. There were no cars behind them, but there was something strange in the sky, an enormous gray cloud moving very quickly toward them. A shiver of fear jangled Dex's spine. "Is that a supercell?" "Could be," Dr. Gage said. "There's so much happening on the radar right now. It's hard to know. It's pretty far back. Let's see if we can take a better look." He made a quick U-turn so that now they were driving slowly in the opposite direction toward the cloud. It was very dark, but with a hazy blur in the center, it stretched out across the horizon as far as Dex could see. Dr. Gage stared through the cracked windshield, scanning the sky like a seal searching for enemy shooters. And then a flash of lightning flared inside the cloud, lighting it up from inside like an X-ray. "Oh, my Lord," Dr. Gage whispered. In the split second of brightness, they both had seen what was hidden inside the storm cloud. It was a tornado. An enormous churning tornado, the biggest Dex had ever imagined. It was on a path to destroy Joplin. Chapter 10. Dr. Gage turned the SUV around, and they raced away from the tornado. He punched 911 into his phone. A woman's voice came over the speaker. "911 emergency." "This is Dr. Norman Gage. I'm a storm chaser. There is a massive tornado on the ground in southwest Joplin. It could be a mile wide, and it is rain-wrapped and almost impossible to see. People need to be warned right away." Dex's heart pounded. Had he heard right? Could a tornado really be 1 mile wide? If the tornado kept going in the same direction, it would wipe out some of the most crowded parts of the city. Dex's school, the St. John's Hospital complex, Dex's church, all the stores and supermarkets and fast food restaurants that lined South Range Line Road. In Dex's neighborhood, the wind shook the windows of the SUV. The air was filled with leaves, branches, and black roof shingles. "This is a huge tornado and very strong," Dr. Gage warned. "Please get the sirens going." He hung up with the 911 operator and handed the phone to Dex. "Call your parents," he said. "Tell them both to take cover and to spread the word." Dex glanced at the time. It was almost 5:40. Were they home from the graduation yet? With shaking hands, Dex called home. All he got was a fast busy signal. Same thing when he tried to call Mom's cell and then Dad's. Was cell service cut off? Just then, a piercing shriek ran out through the air. Finally, the tornado sirens. "Yoo!" But was it too late? And would people pay attention? Would Mom and Dad know to run to the basement? Would Zeke go with them? His dog hated it down there. How many people in Joplin knew what was coming? It was now pouring rain, and the gray cloud was completely invisible. A massive tornado was about to hit Joplin, and nobody could see it. Dr. Gage's terrifying words came back to Dex, black walls of death. The wind was getting stronger, gusting and howling breaths. Trees swayed back and forth. A huge limb broke off and flew across the street. Dex noticed a new color on the radar map, pink. "Dr. Gage," he said softly, "what are those pink dots?" They were scattered across the red blobs like sprinkles. Dr. Gage glanced at the screen, his face grim. "Debris," he answered finally. "Debris?" It took Dex a few seconds to get it. Those pink dots were pieces of houses and buildings and cars that had been sucked thousands of feet into the sky. Dex's eyes flooded with tears. Joplin! His city was being torn to pieces. Dr. Gage picked up the handset of his ham radio, which would work even when cell service was out. "Jimmy, Sarah, you there?" There was a loud crackle and then Sarah's voice. "Norm, where are you? We're heading into Joplin. I wish you could see this. It's massive. We're following it." "Stay back," he said. "It's right behind us on 20th Street. Dex gasped as he watched a telephone pole break in half and slam onto the road in front of them. The wires erupted into a spray of sparks. Dr. Gage dropped the handset and hit the brakes. "Norm!" Sarah called. "Norm!" The car skidded into the rain-slick road. It whipped around in a circle, around and around like a sickening carnival ride. They were heading right for a huge oak tree, and Dex braced himself for a terrible crash. The car swerved at the last minute, and they missed the tree. Instead, they plowed into a chain-link fence, breaking through the metal mesh and finally lurching to a stop. They sat there for a moment, too stunned to speak. They were in front of Peter's garage, where Dad took his car to be fixed. A chunk of the road tore away and smacked into the car. A stop sign shot past them like an arrow. The wind was really howling now, branches and roof shingles swirling in the air. Dr. Gage jammed the SUV into reverse and tried to back up. Here's a picture of what they saw. Peter's garage, and there's the upside-down car. But the car was tangled inside the broken fence. The sky darkened, the winds howled with fury, rocks and branches pounded their windows. Jimmy's panicked voice crackled on the radio. "Norm! Norm!" But Dr. Gage was busy trying to free them from the fence. The wheels spun, the engine whined. Come on, Dr. Gage worked desperately to free the car. At last, the car began to move. He'd done it, but no. It wasn't Dr. Gage who was moving the car. It was the wind. It rocked the car back and forth, up and down. Suddenly, Dex's ears started to pop, and there was a noise like nothing Dex had ever heard, like thousands of Black Hawk helicopters had exploded from the sky, their engines roaring, their blades whirling. The tornado, it had come for them. That's where we're stopping today.